Lachlan Mercer hated interviews, but he hated being called a recluse millionaire even more, so when his PR team practically begged him to do one live talk show to soften his image before his new eco-tech venture launched, he gave one condition: one show, one host. No fluff pieces. He didn't expect to walk into a Manhattan studio and come face to face with the woman who'd flip his life upside down. Aurora Bishop, the producer said, ushering him backstage. She's sharp, smart, no nonsense. She'll keep it interesting. Lachlan adjusted his cufflinks, nodding. He was already zoning out, then he stepped onto the stage and saw her. Aurora Bishop was not what he'd expected. No cue cards in hand, no fake smile. Just piercing eyes, dark curls tucked behind one ear, and a tailored navy jumpsuit that said she knew exactly who she was. She was also beautiful, but not in the way most people cared to look. There was fire in her posture, a storm behind her stillness. "Mr. Mercer," she said as the audience clapped, her voice calm, confident. "You don't usually do interviews." "Because people usually ask boring questions," he replied without skipping a beat, sitting across from her. She grinned, and for a second, he forgot there were cameras. 30 minutes passed like 5. Aurora didn't ask fluff. She challenged his business decisions. She quoted his lesser-known interviews. She brought up his childhood growing up in a steel town outside Pittsburgh and the time he disappeared for a year after selling his first company at 26. "You vanished for almost a year after making your first million," she said. "No interviews, no sightings. What did you do?" "I went to fix a roof," Lachlan said. Aurora blinked. "Excuse me, my uncle's cabin in Vermont leaked like hell. I needed to get away. I fixed the roof, chopped wood." Didn't talk, she repeated, amused. "For a year, best year of my life," the audience laughed. So did she. But there was something else in her eyes, curiosity, not about his money, about him. When the show wrapped, the applause was deafening. Lachlan stood, ready to leave. But Aurora surprised him again. "You're not what I expected," she said, stepping off the stage beside him. "Disappointed?" he asked, watching her closely. She tilted her head. "Not yet." He let out a low laugh. "Good. Because I hate being predictable." Before he could stop himself, Lachlan added, "Dinner?" Aurora blinked. "You want to go out to dinner? You asked me real questions. That deserves a real thank you." She raised an eyebrow. "You trying to bribe a journalist?" "I'm trying to have dinner with a woman who didn't care about my bank account." She hesitated. "I don't date guests. I won't be a guest tomorrow." She stared at him for a long second, her lips curved slowly. "All right, Mercer." One dinner? Dinner turned into 3 hours at a low-lit restaurant in Tribeca he'd bought into last year. He didn't tell her that he just asked for their quietest table and had them surprise her with the chef's tasting menu. "You planned this?" Aurora asked, taking in the candlelit rooftop setting. "Not exactly," Lachlan said, "but I hate noise, and you seem like someone who prefers conversation." "I do," she said, sipping her wine. "But I don't usually get rooftop dinners with wine that costs more than my monthly rent." "Should I apologize?" she laughed. "Not unless you expect me to be impressed." "I don't want you to be impressed," he said, eyes locked on hers. "I want you to be honest." She went quiet at that. Then she leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "All right. Honestly, I thought you'd be arrogant, cold, maybe robotic." "And now you're still arrogant," she said with a grin. "But you're not cold. Would you believe me if I said I haven't felt this warm in a long time?" Aurora looked away for a second. The wind caught her curls. He wanted to tuck one behind her ear, but didn't move. "You're an intense man, Lachlan Mercer, I know. And I don't do flings." "I don't either." She looked back at him, and for a moment, neither of them said a word. The city buzzed behind them, but the space between them was electric. He didn't kiss her that night. But when he dropped her off at her apartment, he held her gaze for a long second before saying, "I'm going to see you again." Aurora didn't answer. She just closed the car door slowly, turned around, and walked inside. He watched her until the door shut. Then he whispered to himself, "What the hell just happened?" The next week he sent her flowers, not roses, white tulips, simple, clean. She didn't respond. 2 days later he showed up after her live taping with coffee, her favorite somehow. "You remembered," she said, eyeing the cup. You mentioned it once, I listen, she sighed. You're not giving up, are you? No, Aurora narrowed her eyes at him. Why? Because I haven't stopped thinking about you since the second you said I wasn't what you expected. She stared at him for a beat, then turned and walked off. But this time, she said over her shoulder, I'm free Friday. Friday turned into a weekend trip to Montauk, just them. No cameras, no press, and that weekend changed everything. They walked the beach barefoot, ate lobster rolls from paper plates, and talked until sunrise. He told her about how money made people lie. She told him how fame made people fake. He kissed her on the second night. It was slow, intentional, like he'd been waiting years to do it. And when she whispered his name against his lips, something in him unraveled. He didn't want to go back to his penthouse. She didn't want to go back to her studio. But reality didn't wait. 3 weeks later, the tabloids caught wind. Talk show host secretly dating reclusive millionaire. Aurora was furious. You said you didn't want press. I didn't leak it. She paced her apartment. I can't lose my job over this. You won't, he said. I'm serious, Lachlan. This could ruin everything I've built. He stepped forward, voice low. And what about what we're building? She stopped. And for the first time, he saw fear in her eyes. I like you, she said. More than I should, but I've worked too hard, I know, he said. So let me fix it. She shook her head. You can't fix this with money. I wasn't going to, he pulled her into his arms. I was going to fix it by making this real, public, official. Aurora blinked. What do you mean? He kissed her forehead. I mean I'm done hiding, from the press, from you, from any of it. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. I'm in love with you, Aurora Bishop. Her breath hitched. And I'm not going anywhere. Aurora hadn't been to Lachlan's townhouse before, the one on the Upper East Side with a private elevator and a doorman who didn't blink when she said her name. She stood in the foyer now, her heels echoing against the polished marble floor as a soft instrumental version of something classical played from somewhere above. The place was quiet but not sterile. Warm wood, walls lined with art that looked original, not curated. A spiral staircase curved to a second level, and beyond the entryway, a sunken living room glowed with the amber light of a fire already burning. Lachlan came down the stairs in a navy sweater and black slacks, barefoot, holding 2 wine glasses. I was going to take you out, he said, handing her one, but you looked tired on the phone. I am, she said, glancing around. Long day, long week. Then stay, he said simply. You don't have to talk, you don't even have to drink that, just sit. Rest. She took the glass and followed him inside. A plush sofa faced the fire and a tray of food, roasted vegetables, grilled chicken. Something with goat cheese was already waiting. Not catered, not plated like a restaurant. Homemade, you cooked, she asked, raising an eyebrow. I do that when I need to think, he said, pouring water into a glass for her. Tonight I had a lot to think about. Aurora sat, slipping off her heels. You're not going to ask about the meeting with my producers? No. Why not? Because you'll tell me when you're ready. She watched him settle in beside her, his expression unreadable but his presence grounding. They want me to co-host a new political panel show, she said after a long pause. National network, twice a week, live. He looked at her, eyes steady. That's big. It is. And they'll pull me from my current show. No more interviews, no more one-on-ones. Just policy debate and commentary. He leaned back. Would you like that? She hesitated. I don't know, it's more visibility, more reach, but it's not what I love. What do you love? She turned toward the fire, her voice quieter. Conversations that change the way people think. Not just arguing for airtime. Then don't take it. It's not that simple, you're right, he said. It's not, but your integrity is not a commodity, and you don't owe anyone a version of yourself that doesn't feel real. She looked at him then, really looked. He wasn't trying to fix it. He wasn't offering to make a call, he was just listening. Why are you like this? She asked suddenly. Like what? Calm, unshakable, like you've already figured everything out. I haven't, he said, but I've lost enough to know what matters. And I won't waste energy trying to control what I can't. She sat back, letting his words wash over her. The fire crackled. Somewhere outside, a horn blared briefly. Inside, the quiet stretched comfortably. I met your sister, she said, changing the subject. He blinked. When? She came by the studio, said she was in town. He set down his glass. What did she say? She's worried about you. She always is. She said you used to paint. That made him go still. She said you stopped after your mother passed. I did. Why? He didn't answer right away. Then finally, because it stopped feeling honest, I only ever painted for her. After, it felt like pretending. Aurora nodded slowly. Maybe you were supposed to find a new reason. He met her gaze. Maybe I was. Neither of them moved. The air between them held something soft, something unspoken. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. They offered me a contract. I haven't signed yet. He didn't touch it, just looked at her. What do you want me to do with it? He asked. Nothing, she said. I just didn't want to read it alone. He leaned forward, brushing her hair behind her shoulder. You never have to do anything alone again. Her breath caught. I mean it, he added. You've been carrying everything by yourself for too long. She looked away, swallowing hard. I don't want you to feel like you have to fix me. I don't, he said. I just want to hold the pieces while you figure out how to fit them back together. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, she said, You're not making this easy. Good, he said. Because I'm not going anywhere. The next morning, they were on his terrace, both holding mugs as the city woke up below them. She wore one of his shirts, oversized and warm, her legs curled beneath her. I've never been this transparent with anyone before, she said quietly. That's probably why it's working, he replied. She glanced at him. You ever think about the future? Every day. And he turned to her. I see you in it. The words landed softly, no fanfare, no dramatics, just truth. You think people like us can make it work? She asked. He looked at her long and hard. Not if we keep asking ourselves what could break us, but maybe if we start building like we already belong. She didn't answer. Just reached across the space between them and laced her fingers through his. A week later, Aurora made her decision. She walked into the executive producer's office, placed the unsigned contract on his desk, and said, I'm not the right fit. Thank you for thinking of me. He tried to argue. She didn't let him. Afterward, she stood outside the building, phone in hand, heart pounding. Lachlan picked up on the first ring. You free tonight? She asked. I can be. There's something I want to show you. He arrived at her apartment that evening in a charcoal coat and leather gloves, snow flurries dusting his shoulders. She took him upstairs. Inside, her living room had been transformed. A canvas stood in the corner, brushes, paint tubes. A drop cloth laid carefully across the floor. I bought supplies, she said, but I figured it's your hands that matter. He looked around, stunned. You want me to paint? I want you to start again, even if it's just one stroke. He crossed the room slowly, touched the edge of the canvas. You remembered what your sister said, he murmured. I remember everything you tell me, she replied. He turned to her, emotion flickering in his eyes. You're not like anyone I've ever known. Then stop pretending I'm temporary, she said, stepping closer. Because I'm not. He dropped the gloves, reached for her waist. I know that now. And when he kissed her slow, grounding, full of things he hadn't said yet it wasn't a beginning. It was a promise. You're really not going to look at the reviews. Aurora leaned against the kitchen island, barefoot in one of Lachlan's sweatshirts, watching him pour batter into a sizzling pan. No, Lachlan said, flipping the pancake with practiced ease. I already lived it. Why read about it? They're glowing, she said. They called your segment the most authentic moment on live television this year, and someone started a poll titled, Should Lachlan Mercer Run for President? He glanced over, one eyebrow raised. Now that's terrifying. Aurora laughed, brushing a curl back from her temple. You were honest, that's rare. I was with you, he said simply. That made it easier. She looked at him for a moment, her expression unreadable, then she crossed to the table where a folder sat unopened. I have to tell you something. Lachlan turned off the burner. All right. She opened the folder and slid it across the table. My father reached out, Lachlan's hands stilled. I didn't know you still spoke. I don't, she said, sitting down. He walked out when I was 12. Never sent a letter, not even a birthday call. Now, out of nowhere, he wants to reconnect. What does he want? He says he wants to make amends, she said. But he also sent a proposal. He's producing a docuseries about reconciliation between estranged parents and adult children. He wants me to be episode 1. Lachlan stared at her, jaw tight. That's not reconciliation, that's exploitation. "I know," she said, voice low, "but part of me still wants to yell at him on camera just once. Let the world see what he did." "I'd support you," Lachlan said, "but I'd also want to make sure you're not reopening a wound just to bleed in public." Aurora looked down at her hands. "I thought I was past it. But when I saw his name on that envelope, I couldn't breathe." Lachlan stepped around the counter and crouched in front of her. "You don't owe him anything, least of all your peace." She nodded, eyes glassy. I don't want to carry his absence into what we're building." "You won't," he said, "because we name it now and then we move forward." She exhaled deeply, the tension in her shoulders easing. "You always know what to say." "I don't," he said. "But I know how to listen." Later that day, they walked through the botanical gardens in the Bronx. It was quiet for once, the air cool, the trees heavy with late spring bloom. Aurora paused near a stone bench covered in ivy. "I used to come here with my mother," she said. Before everything got complicated, Lachlan sat beside her. "Tell me something about her." She collected glass animals, tiny ones. "I used to sneak into her cabinet and rearrange them when she wasn't looking. She always knew." "Where are they now?" Aurora hesitated. "Storage." "I haven't opened that box since her funeral." "Maybe we should," Lachlan said. "Not today, but when you're ready." She reached for his hand. "I want to stop carrying the past like it explains me." "Then stop," he said. "Let's write a different ending." The next weekend, they flew to Nova Scotia. Lachlan didn't tell her why. He just said, "Pack warm, you'll know when we get there." The car ride was nearly 2 hours. At the end of a winding cliffside road sat a weather-beaten house with wide windows and a wraparound porch. Aurora stepped out of the car and stared. "Whose is this?" "It was my mother's favorite place," he said. "She brought my father here once before he passed. I haven't been back since." Aurora turned to him. "Why bring me?" "I needed to remember her without the grief," he said. "And I wanted you to see where I go when I stop pretending I'm in control." Inside, the house was rustic but full of warmth. Woven rugs, faded books, and a fireplace that still held the scent of pine. Aurora walked slowly through the rooms, her fingers brushing over old furniture, photographs, a painting hung above the mantel. "This one's yours," she said, stopping in front of it. He nodded. "I painted it the year she died, my last one." "It's beautiful," she said. "You captured something." Still, she used to say peace isn't quiet, it's surrendering to the quiet. They stayed that night in the house, curled up under layers of wool blankets, the wind howling outside like something alive. At dawn, Lachlan rose early barefoot and set up a blank canvas on the screened-in porch. Aurora woke to the sound of brush on cloth. She didn't say anything. Just wrapped herself in a blanket and watched him paint. When he finished, he turned the canvas to show her. It was her, not her face, but her presence. A silhouette standing beneath a canopy of leaves, arms lifted as if catching light no one else could see. She stared for a long moment, then said, "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to," he said. "Just don't run." "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "Not from this." "Not from you?" They flew back Monday morning, just in time for Aurora's live segment. She wore a sapphire blouse and a new pair of heels Lachlan hadn't seen before. "You look different," he said backstage. "I feel different," she replied. "Like I finally stopped waiting for someone else to give me permission to be happy." The show went on without a hitch. After, her producer pulled her aside. "You've been requested to host the Global Media Summit's keynote interview this year," he said. "It's the biggest audience we've ever had." "You interested?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Only if I get to choose the guest." "Of course," he said. "Who do you want?" She turned to where Lachlan stood, half silhouetted by a hallway light, watching her with quiet pride. "That one," she said. Lachlan Mercer. The interview was set for 4 weeks later. The venue, an open-air theater in the south of France overlooking the sea. As they stood on the balcony of their hotel room the night before, Aurora turned to him. "Are you nervous?" "No," he said. "I'm already standing next to my answer." She tilted her head. "To what question?" "To what I was missing before I met you." The sea below the cliffside theater was dark velvet, its surface glittering beneath the soft evening lights. The Global Media Summit's stage framed it like a painting, backed by a crescent moon and the rhythmic hush of waves far below. Rows of guests in formal attire murmured in anticipation, the scent of salt and blooming oleander drifting on the breeze. Aurora stood backstage, microphone clipped to her lapel, earpiece adjusted, every breath measured. This wasn't nerves. It was clarity. The kind that came when you knew you were about to do something that would change the shape of your life. Lachlan stood just beyond the curtain, already dressed in a midnight black suit, no tie, collar open. His hands were tucked in his pockets, eyes on the horizon, as if grounding himself in the steady pull of the sea. She stepped beside him. "You ready?" He didn't look at her right away. Instead, he said, "I thought I would hate this." "What changed? You did." The stage manager gave the signal. Aurora entered first, greeted by a wave of applause. The set was designed like a conversation salon, 2 chairs angled beneath soft lighting, a small table between them with 2 crystal glasses and nothing else. No cue cards, no teleprompters, just her and the man she hadn't planned on loving. When Lachlan joined her on stage, the applause intensified. He looked more at ease than anyone expected, but there was tension in his shoulders, the kind that didn't come from fear, it came from meaning. They sat, the applause faded. Aurora leaned in slightly, microphone live. "Lachlan Mercer. You once said you didn't do interviews because people ask boring questions. Should I be worried?" He gave a low chuckle, eyes never leaving hers. "Depends how honest you want this to get. You've built one of the most disruptive clean tech companies in the world, walked away from several others at their height, and disappeared for nearly a year without explanation. But tonight," she paused, "we're not talking about that." The audience held its breath. She continued, "We're talking about what happens when the version of you the public thinks they know collides with the person you become when no one's watching." Lachlan nodded slowly. "Then I guess tonight's about telling the truth." "For starters," Aurora said, "why now? Why agree to this summit interview when you've avoided them for years?" He looked out at the water, then back at her. "Because it's the first time I've been asked by someone who sees me." A quiet ripple moved through the audience. She didn't flinch. "What do you think they see when they look at you?" "Money," he said without hesitation. "Power, control, maybe arrogance, but they don't see the weight, the cost. The people I've lost, the parts of myself I gave up to make sure no one could ever take anything from me again." Aurora's voice softened, but her words didn't waver. "What did you give up?" "Time," he said. "Peace. People who didn't wait around to see if I'd ever stop building long enough to actually live. And now," he looked straight at her, "now I'm not building alone." She didn't smile, didn't fill the silence, just let it stretch and settle into the space between them. Then she asked, "Do you think love is something people like you can trust?" He leaned forward, folding his hands. "I didn't, not until someone showed me it could be earned, not demanded, not bought, just shown over and over in the quiet moments. In the hard ones." Aurora's eyes didn't leave his. "You once told me you weren't going anywhere. I meant it." "So what happens after tonight?" Lachlan stood slowly, reaching into his jacket. The air shifted. He turned toward the audience, but his gaze found hers again. "I didn't come here just to tell the truth," he said. "I came here to make a promise." He stepped to the center of the stage, pulled out something small and velvet blue. Gasps traveled through the rows. Aurora blinked, her breath catching even before he dropped to one knee. "I was wrong the first time I told you what I saw in my future," he said. "It's not just you, it's us. A home that doesn't echo, a life that doesn't need hiding, and a love that doesn't ask either of us to shrink." He opened the box. Inside was a ring unlike any she'd ever seen. No oversized diamond, just a clean, clear sapphire set in a band of brushed platinum. "I want to marry you," he said. "Not because it's perfect, not because we're ready, but because we'll figure it out together every day. And I've never wanted anything more." Aurora stood slowly, the sound of her heart beat louder than the applause rising around them. She walked toward him, and without hesitation she said, "Yes." The moment the word left her lips, the crowd erupted, but neither of them heard it. Lachlan rose, slipping the ring onto her finger, his hands steady, his eyes never leaving hers. "You just proposed to me on international live television," she whispered. "I couldn't risk you walking away before I asked." "I was never going to walk away." He kissed her then, "Not a performance. Not a show. Just the kind of kiss that closed distance and rewrote everything that came before it. The summit closed with their photo on every major news outlet by morning, but they didn't stay for the after-party. Instead, they walked through the old streets of the coastal town, hand in hand, silent except for the laughter that rose now and then between them. In the weeks that followed, the world watched their story unfold. But they didn't perform it. They lived it. Aurora returned to her show with a new format she created, one that focused on depth, not spectacle. Lachlan backed it quietly, never asking for credit. She moved into his townhouse but kept her own space until the wedding, her choice, no questions asked. Their ceremony was small. Barefoot in Vermont, beneath a canopy of pine trees, the same place where he once fixed a roof and learned to be alone. This time he learned how to stay. Their vows weren't written in calligraphy or printed on parchment. They were whispered, hands joined, eyes locked, promises made not in poetry but in presence. "I'll choose you when it's easy," she said, "and especially when it's not. I'll build with you," he said, "not around you, not over you, with you." They kissed before the officiant finished speaking. And when their guests threw wildflower petals instead of rice, Aurora laughed so hard she dropped her bouquet, and Lachlan lifted her off her feet and carried her straight through the meadow. Years later, no matter how many headlines or profiles were written, the story always came back to that night. The night a guarded millionaire stepped on stage and found the woman who would become his wife, not with fanfare, not with strategy, but with truth, and the kind of love that doesn't need to be explained, only lived. The snow outside the townhouse fell in slow spirals, blanketing the slate steps and the wrought iron balcony in white. Inside, the fire crackled low in the hearth, and the scent of cinnamon and clove drifted from the pot simmering on the stove. Aurora stood in the hallway, her coat unbuttoned, scarf still looped around her neck, eyes on the package resting in Lachlan's hands. He turned it over once more before looking up. It came this morning, no return address. Her fingers closed around the edge of her scarf. "Is it from him?" He nodded once, then passed it to her. "I didn't open it." She carried it to the dining table, peeled back the brown paper carefully, and lifted the lid of the box inside. A small glass elephant sat nestled in tissue, one of her mother's. The very one that used to sit at the front of the cabinet. Alongside it, a single envelope. She took a breath, opened it, and read silently. Her father's handwriting was unmistakable, but the words were different this time. No requests, no apologies, just a short note. "I found this in storage. I thought it should be with you." She folded the letter and set it aside. "He's not asking for anything, he just sent it." Lachlan sat across from her, watching her face. "How do you feel?" "Lighter," she said. "Like something I didn't realize I was still carrying just let go." She picked up the elephant, turned it over in her hands, and then placed it gently in the center of the sideboard beneath a framed photo of her and her mother. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. That afternoon, they packed bags for Greece, not for business, not for interviews, for them. They hadn't taken a honeymoon after the wedding, too many moving parts, too many deadlines. Now, with everything quieting, the timing was finally right. The villa sat on a hillside above the sea in Santorini, whitewashed walls and cobalt shutters, a terrace strung with lanterns. They arrived just before dusk, and Aurora stepped barefoot across the worn stone tiles, the wind lifting her hair as she stared out at the horizon. "I've never seen anything so still," she said. Lachlan joined her, sliding an arm around her waist. "That's how I feel when I'm near you." She turned her head, amused. "That's dangerously close to corny." "I'm in love," he said. "I'm allowed to be corny now." They laughed together, then leaned into the silence, the kind that didn't ask to be filled. The days passed in golden rhythms. They swam in the sea, slow and unhurried. They made breakfast together, arguing over who made better eggs. They wandered through markets and bought things they didn't need: hand-woven baskets, a cracked amphora, figs still warm from the sun. Each night they returned to the villa, salt still in their hair, and fell asleep tangled together with the windows open and the scent of the sea drifting in. On the fifth night, Aurora stood on the terrace in a dress the color of sea glass, her bare feet silent on the cool tile. Lachlan came up behind her, wrapping a shawl across her shoulders. "I've been thinking about something," she said. "Dangerous," he teased. "I want to start a foundation," she said. "For young women in media, not just scholarships, real mentorship, real access." He blinked, then nodded. "Tell me what you need, I'll back every step." "I don't want your money, well, I do," she said, laughing, "but I want your mind more. I want to build it like a business, not a charity, something sustainable." "Then let's design it together," he said. "You lead, I follow." Her expression softened. "You'd really follow?" "I'd follow you into a war zone," he said, "but this sounds more rewarding." They stayed another week in Greece, laying the groundwork for the foundation between dinner reservations and moonlit swims. When they returned to New York, everything moved fast. They secured office space, a team, a name, the Bishop Initiative. Lachlan introduced her to the right legal minds, but he let her steer every decision. Months passed. Aurora's show expanded into an international platform. Lachlan's company rolled out a new solar battery that changed the grid game for rural communities. He turned down speaking engagements in favor of quieter work, and for the first time, he seemed more at ease in his own life. One morning, Aurora stood in the courtyard of their Vermont home, the one they'd restored together, room by room. The air was sharp with early spring, and the trees were just beginning to bud. She held a letter in her hand, still unopened. Lachlan stepped out of the kitchen behind her, coffee in one hand, a quiet look in his eye. "That from the network," she nodded. "They offered me the prime time slot, 5 nights a week, full creative control." He raised a brow. "That's everything you ever wanted." "I know," she said. "But I don't think I want it anymore." He waited. "I want time," she continued, "to build the foundation, to write, to travel with you without checking a broadcast schedule." He handed her the mug. "Then say no." She looked at him, astonished. "Just like that, you gave them your best," he said. "Now give yourself the rest." She exhaled, tension she hadn't realized she was carrying releasing all at once. They walked the orchard together, the grass still damp from morning dew, and when she finally dropped the unopened letter into the fire pit later that evening, neither of them looked back. Their days fell into a rhythm again. Weekends in the cabin, evenings on the townhouse terrace, no press. No headlines, just a life they built slowly, intentionally. One summer evening, Lachlan came in from the garden carrying a small velvet pouch. Aurora was curled on the couch, reading submissions for the foundation's next round of mentees. "I found something," he said, handing it to her. She opened it carefully. Inside was a delicate gold chain, and hanging from it, a charm, an elephant glass, unmistakably from the same set her mother had collected. "I didn't know there was another," she whispered. "I called the antique shop in Vermont. The one we passed that day after the wedding, they had it in a locked case." She looked up at him, eyes full. "You remembered?" "I always will." He fastened it around her neck, his fingers brushing the curve of her collarbone. Later that night, they lay beneath the stars on the rooftop, a blanket beneath them, a bottle of wine between them. Aurora rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Do you think we would have found each other if I hadn't taken that interview?" she asked. "I think I would have found you anyway," he said, "even if it took me a lifetime." "You're sure?" He kissed the top of her head. "I'm sure of 2 things, that I love you and that I'll never stop choosing you." She rolled onto her side, hand to his cheek. "Then I guess we're exactly where we're supposed to be." And they were. Because everything that once felt out of reach, peace, purpose, love, had found its way to them. Not in grand declarations, but in the quiet certainty of a life lived fully together. They never needed the spotlight again. Because what they had was already brilliant, and it belonged only to them.